The Motivation Manifesto begins with a powerful emotional call. Brendon Burchard is not simply trying to teach productivity, discipline, or success habits. He is trying to wake the reader up. His message is that too many people are living smaller than they should. They are not fully expressing their potential, not because they lack intelligence or ability, but because they have slowly surrendered their freedom, their voice, and their personal power. According to Burchard, many people live under invisible forms of control. They fear judgment. They avoid conflict. They shrink their dreams to stay safe. They let habit, comfort, social pressure, and self-doubt dictate the boundaries of their life. Over time, they stop asking what they truly want. They become careful instead of alive. They become obedient to fear instead of devoted to purpose. This is where the manifesto begins. It is a declaration that a fuller life is possible, but only if a person is willing to reclaim ownership of who they are and how they live. Burchard's tone is intense because he believes this issue is serious. He is not discussing minor lifestyle improvement. He is talking about the emotional imprisonment people build around themselves when they stop living deliberately. The book argues that motivation is not just about getting excited for a few days. It is about remembering what it means to be human, to think freely, to choose consciously, to pursue a meaningful life with courage and dignity. Motivation, in this sense, is not a temporary emotional high. It is a force that helps a person reclaim their agency. This opening matters because it sets the tone for everything that follows. Burchard wants the reader to stop drifting. He wants them to stop negotiating with mediocrity, stop living for approval, and stop acting as if their one life can be wasted without consequence. He frames this as a moral and personal awakening. What makes the message powerful is that it speaks to a feeling many people quietly carry. They sense they are capable of more. They feel that their life has become too repetitive, too cautious, too disconnected from their deeper values. But instead of changing, they settle. The Motivation Manifesto exists to interrupt that pattern. The deeper message of the opening is simple but powerful. Your life belongs to you. Your mind belongs to you. Your choices matter. Your future is not supposed to be handed over to fear, distraction, or passivity. If you want to feel more alive, more driven, and more free, you must begin by waking up to the truth that you were not made to live half-heartedly. One of the central ideas in the Motivation Manifesto is that freedom sits at the heart of motivation. Brendon Burchard argues that human beings are most energized when they feel free. Free to think, free to choose, free to act, free to create, free to love, and free to pursue a life that reflects their real values. When freedom is lost, motivation fades. People become numb, passive, resentful, or trapped. This freedom is not only political or external. Burchard is mostly focused on inner freedom, the ability to direct your own thoughts and life without being controlled by fear, insecurity, social pressure, or unconscious habit. He believes many people are technically free on the outside, but psychologically imprisoned on the inside. That inner imprisonment shows up in familiar ways. People stay silent when they want to speak. They say yes when they need to say no. They choose comfort instead of courage. They let old stories about their identity define what they believe is possible. They live according to expectation instead of conviction. Burchard says that as long as your mind is controlled by fear and approval-seeking, your life will never feel fully yours. And if your life does not feel like it belongs to you, your motivation will always be unstable. Why would you feel deeply energized if you are living someone else's script? This is why freedom matters so much in the book. Motivation becomes sustainable when it is connected to self-directed living. The more your life reflects your truth, your standards, your mission, and your conscious decisions, the more energy you naturally feel. Freedom and motivation feed each other. This principle is especially important because many people think they need more motivation when what they really need is more ownership. They do not need another inspirational quote. They need to stop living reactively. They need to stop betraying what matters most to them. Burchard's message here is powerful Reclaiming motivation begins by reclaiming freedom. That means paying attention to where you have become emotionally dependent on approval, where you have surrendered choice, and where you have allowed fear to quietly rule your decisions. The practical lesson is that you must start asking harder questions. Am I living in alignment with what I truly value? Am I making decisions from truth or fear? Am I acting like a free human being or like someone trying to avoid discomfort at all costs? In Burchard's view, the more honestly you answer those questions, the more alive your motivation becomes. If freedom is the foundation of motivation, then fear is one of its greatest enemies. Brendon Burchard returns again and again to the destructive role fear plays in human life. Not just dramatic fear, but subtle fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of failure. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of being seen. Fear of criticism. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of losing comfort. Burchard's argument is that fear does not only create pain, it creates limitation. It convinces people to live below their capacity. It makes them silent when they should speak, cautious when they should act, and small when they should expand. Fear is not always loud. Often it hides behind rationalizations that sound reasonable. It can disguise itself as perfectionism, overthinking, indecision, delay, or the desire to wait for the right moment. This is what makes fear so dangerous. Many people do not realize how deeply it shapes their daily lives. They think they are being realistic, but often they are being ruled by anxiety. They think they are staying safe, but in reality they are slowly abandoning their deeper ambitions. Burchard wants the reader to confront this directly. He does not present fear as something unusual. He presents it as one of the most common forces in life. But he also insists that fear must not be obeyed. It can be acknowledged, felt, studied, and moved through, but it cannot be allowed to define the boundaries of a meaningful life. This section matters because so much lost potential comes not from lack of talent, but from habitual surrender to fear. A person may have ideas, gifts, insight, and ambition, but if fear is always the final decision maker, none of that potential becomes reality. The practical lesson is not to wait for fear to disappear. It is to build courage in action. Burchard wants people to understand that confidence often comes after movement, not before it. The more often you act despite fear, the weaker its authority becomes. He is also encouraging a deeper mental shift. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" begin asking, "What does fear keep costing me? What kind of life am I building by obeying fear again and again?" Those questions can be uncomfortable, but they are powerful because they expose the real price of passivity. In the Motivation Manifesto, fear is treated as a real force, but not a sacred one. It is something to understand, challenge, and outgrow. Because if you want motivation that lasts, you must stop giving fear the power to decide who you become. A major theme in the Motivation Manifesto is that a strong life does not happen by accident. Brendon Burchard insists that a person must make a declaration. They must consciously decide the kind of life they are going to live. Without that declaration, they get swept up by convenience, habit, distraction, and the opinions of others. This is important because most people do not really choose their life with clarity. They react to opportunities, pressures, and routines. They drift into jobs, relationships, habits, and environments without deep reflection. They let time pass without ever defining what they actually stand for. Burchard sees this as one of the great tragedies of modern life. A human being with imagination, will, and creative power ends up living automatically. They live by default instead of by decision. That is why he speaks in the language of declaration. A declaration has force. It creates identity. It marks a turning point. It says, "This is who I choose to be now. This is what I will no longer tolerate. This is what I intend to build with my life." The power of declaration is that it transforms vague desire into conscious commitment. Wanting a better life is not enough. A person must state their values, their standards, and their direction. They must decide what kind of energy they will bring, what kind of life they want to create, and what kind of person they refuse to remain. This principle is useful because it gives motivation a target. Motivation without direction becomes emotional noise. But once a person declares who they intend to become, energy has somewhere to go. Effort gains structure. Discipline gains meaning. The practical application here is clear. Write down the kind of life you want. Define your values. Name the standards you want to live by. Identify the patterns that no longer fit the person you are trying to become. Stop speaking vaguely about change and start describing it precisely. Burchard wants the reader to understand that declaration is an act of power. It interrupts drift. It reminds you that your life is not a random collection of days. It is a creation. And the moment you begin declaring your direction with honesty and courage, you stop being a passive participant in your own story. In his view, motivation grows stronger when life becomes intentional. The clearer your declaration, the stronger your drive. Because deep down, people do not just want excitement. They want purpose. They want to feel that they are living on purpose, not just passing through time. Brendon Burchard makes it clear that freedom and motivation do not survive without self-mastery. A person may want a bold, intentional, and meaningful life, but if they cannot direct their own mind and behavior, their potential remains fragile. Self-mastery is what turns desire into structure. This idea matters because many people talk about empowerment while still being ruled by impulse. They want success, peace, confidence, and impact, but their attention is scattered, their emotions are undisciplined, and their habits are inconsistent. Burchard argues that real personal power is not loud. It is the ability to govern yourself. That means mastering your focus, your emotional responses, your standards, your routines, and your choices. It means becoming someone who does not surrender every decision to comfort, distraction, or mood. Self-mastery is not about becoming rigid or cold. It is about becoming reliable to yourself. This is one of the strongest messages in the book because it restores dignity to discipline. In many cases, discipline is treated like punishment. Burchard flips that idea. He presents discipline as a form of liberation. The more you can lead yourself, the less you are controlled by chaos. The more you can master your attention and action, the more freedom you actually experience. This also changes the meaning of confidence. Confidence is not just a feeling of certainty. Often it is the result of self-trust. And self-trust grows when you repeatedly prove to yourself that you can act according to your values even when it is difficult. The practical lesson here is simple but demanding. If you want more power in your life, build more command over your own patterns. Learn to direct your mornings. Learn to hold your focus. Learn to act when emotion is unstable. Learn to recover quickly when you fall short. Learn to set standards that your weaker impulses do not get to rewrite every day. Burchard believes that a person's quality of life is shaped by the quality of their self-leadership. A free and motivated life does not belong to the person who feels inspired occasionally. It belongs to the person who can direct themselves steadily. This principle is deeply relevant in a distracted world. Everyone wants more energy, more confidence, more impact. But those things become much more possible when self-mastery becomes part of your identity. Because once you can govern yourself, your life stops being controlled by randomness. It starts being shaped by intention. A powerful emotional thread in the Motivation Manifesto is the idea of honoring your true voice. Brendon Burchard believes that many people suffer because they have become disconnected from their authentic convictions. They know what they care about. They know what they feel. They often know what they want to say or create. But they silence themselves out of fear, politeness, insecurity, or the desire to fit in. Over time, this silence becomes painful. A person may look functional on the outside, but inwardly they begin to feel divided. Their outer behavior no longer matches their deeper truth. They become less alive because too much of their real self is being suppressed. Burchard sees this as a serious problem because expression is tied to vitality. Human beings are meant to speak, create, contribute, and live with sincerity. When that natural expression is blocked by fear or performance, energy begins to collapse. Motivation weakens because the person no longer feels fully present in their own life. This is why he encourages readers to recover their voice. Not in an arrogant or reckless way, but in an honest one. To tell the truth. To create what matters. To say what they mean. To stop filtering their entire existence through the fear of how they will be perceived. The practical lesson here is that motivation increases when you stop betraying yourself. Every time you act in alignment with your deepest values, you feel stronger. Every time you hide what matters most to you, you feel smaller. This principle matters in relationships, work, art, leadership, and self-respect. People often lose energy not because they are lazy, but because they are living too far from their real center. They are saying what is expected, doing what is safe, and avoiding the honesty that would make them feel more alive. Burchard wants readers to understand that your voice matters. Your ideas matter. Your convictions matter. Your contribution matters. The world does not need a diminished version of you trying endlessly to avoid discomfort. It needs a more courageous version of you that is willing to live honestly. The deeper message is that personal power and authentic expression are connected. When you speak and live from truth, you become more integrated. And when you become more integrated, motivation becomes less forced. Energy begins to rise naturally because you are no longer divided against yourself. Brendon Burchard does not present struggle as something abnormal. In fact, one of the more powerful ideas in the Motivation Manifesto is that struggle is part of the human experience, especially for anyone trying to live with excellence, freedom, and purpose. He does not romanticize suffering for its own sake, but he does argue that challenge is inseparable from growth. This matters because many people quietly assume that if they were on the right path, things would feel easier all the time. They interpret friction as a sign that they should stop. But Burchard sees that mindset as a trap. A meaningful life will ask things of you. It will require courage, patience, resilience, sacrifice, and repeated effort. The struggle for greatness is not only about achievement. It is about character. It is about becoming someone stronger, more disciplined, more loving, more honest, and more capable of carrying a bigger life. That transformation does not happen in comfort alone. This principle is powerful because it reframes hardship. Instead of seeing difficulty only as punishment, you begin to see it as training. Instead of asking why life is demanding so much, you begin asking who you are becoming through this challenge. Burchard wants the reader to stop idolizing ease. Ease is pleasant, but it does not always produce depth. Some of the strongest qualities in a person are built by wrestling with fear, resisting temptation, staying faithful to purpose, and continuing when the path feels heavy. This does not mean glorifying burnout or ignoring rest. It means understanding that the life you admire usually comes with effort that most people avoided. Greatness asks for energy. It asks for devotion. It asks for a willingness to keep climbing when the climb stops being glamorous. The practical value of this idea is huge. It helps people stay steady when things become difficult. Instead of collapsing into self-pity or confusion, they can remind themselves that difficulty is often part of the price of growth. Burchard's deeper point is that the struggle itself can be honorable. There is dignity in trying to live fully. There is dignity in resisting fear. There is dignity in continuing to pursue a meaningful life despite pain, doubt, and uncertainty. In that sense, the struggle is not proof that something is wrong. It is often proof that you are engaged in the real work of becoming. One of the most important lessons in the Motivation Manifesto is that motivation becomes stronger when it is connected to meaning. Brendon Burchard is not interested in shallow stimulation. He is not trying to help people get temporarily excited about tasks they do not care about. He is trying to reconnect them to a life that feels significant. This distinction matters. A person can have goals, deadlines, and responsibilities, but still feel empty if those things are not rooted in meaning. They can look productive from the outside while feeling disconnected on the inside. Burchard understands that lasting drive usually comes from a sense that what you are doing matters. Meaning can come from many places. From contribution, from growth, from service, from creativity, from love, from fulfilling a personal mission, from refusing to waste the gifts you have been given. When people feel connected to something bigger than comfort, they often discover a deeper reservoir of energy. This is why the book feels so intense. Burchard wants the reader to confront the possibility that they've been living too casually with something sacred, their one life. He asks them to stop treating their existence like a series of random obligations and start treating it like an opportunity for meaningful expression. The practical lesson here is that if your motivation is weak, one of the first questions to ask is whether your actions feel meaningful. Are you connected to a mission, or are you just maintaining routines? Are you building something that matters to you, or are you performing for appearances? Are your efforts aligned with your deepest values, or have you lost sight of why they matter? Meaning does not always make life easier, but it makes effort more bearable. A hard path connected to purpose often feels more energizing than an easy path connected to emptiness. Burchard wants the reader to understand that meaning is not something passively discovered once and forever. It must be cultivated, protected, and revisited. You have to keep asking what matters. You have to keep choosing what matters. You have to keep aligning your energy with what matters. In this book, motivation is not treated as a trick of psychology. It is treated as a human response to meaning, freedom, courage, and self-directed living. The more deeply your life reflects those things, the less motivation feels like something you must chase. It becomes something that rises from within. Brendon Burchard is deeply aware that a motivated life can be easily weakened by distraction. In the Motivation Manifesto, he presents modern life as full of noise that pulls people away from focus, depth, and real intention. Constant stimulation, shallow entertainment, endless comparison, social pressure, and emotional reactivity can quietly destroy a person's ambition. This is important because many people do not lose their dreams through one major failure. They lose them through fragmentation. Their attention becomes scattered. Their priorities become blurred. Their energy gets drained by what is trivial. Slowly, their deeper aims begin to disappear beneath busyness and distraction. Burchard sees this as a serious threat to personal freedom. If your attention is constantly hijacked, then your life is being shaped by forces you did not consciously choose. That is why ambition must be defended. Not in an anxious way, but in a disciplined one. To defend ambition means protecting your focus. It means being selective about what enters your mind. It means reducing the noise that makes your life reactive. It means creating space for reflection, meaningful work, and real presence. This principle matters because motivation needs clarity to survive. When your life becomes too noisy, your deeper desires become harder to hear. You may still feel restless, but you can no longer clearly identify what you are called to do. The practical application is direct. Pay attention to what consumes your attention every day. Notice how often you let the trivial overpower the meaningful. Notice how distraction has become normalized. Then start creating boundaries. Reduce unnecessary noise. Protect your mornings. Set aside uninterrupted time for what matters. Refuse to let your best energy be consumed by things that do not deserve it. Burchard's deeper point is that freedom requires control over attention. The ability to direct your mind is one of the great powers of a mature person. If you cannot hold your focus, you will struggle to hold your purpose. In this sense, defending ambition is an act of self-respect. It is a decision to stop allowing the world's noise to define your inner life. And for Burchard, that is essential. Because a motivated life is not built by accident. It is built by protecting what matters from everything that tries to weaken it. One of the strongest themes in the Motivation Manifesto is courage. But Brendon Burchard does not describe courage as a dramatic once-in-a-lifetime act. He treats it as a daily practice, a way of living, a repeated choice to move toward truth, purpose, expression, and growth even when discomfort is present. This is important because many people admire courage in theory, but do not recognize how often ordinary life asks for it. Courage is needed when you speak honestly, when you ask for what you want, when you set a boundary, when you begin again after failure, when you create something vulnerable, when you leave what is misaligned, when you stop apologizing for your ambition, when you choose your values over approval. Burchard wants the reader to understand that a courageous life is built in these ordinary moments, not just in the headlines of life, but in the hidden decisions that shape your character. That means courage is available every day. It is not reserved for special people. It is built through repeated use. This perspective is powerful because it makes courage more practical. You do not have to become fearless. You have to become willing. Willing to feel discomfort without surrendering your values. Willing to move before certainty arrives. Willing to act even when your confidence is incomplete. The practical lesson here is that courage grows through practice. The more often you choose the brave action, the more natural it becomes. The more often you avoid, the stronger fear feels. This is why small acts of courage matter. They train identity. Burchard is also clear that courage is closely tied to freedom. A fearful person may technically have choices, but they do not fully use them. Courage restores access to possibility. It widens the life you are willing to live. This section is especially helpful because it breaks the illusion that meaningful change can happen without discomfort. If you want a fuller life, courage must become part of your routine. It cannot be saved only for emergencies. In the Motivation Manifesto, courage is not treated like a personality trait. It is treated like a discipline of the soul, a practice that keeps you honest, free, and alive. And the more you practice it, the more your motivation stops being fragile and starts becoming rooted in strength. A beautiful idea running through the Motivation Manifesto is that the human spirit naturally longs for expansion. Brendon Burchard believes people are not meant to remain stagnant. They are built with a desire to grow, create, explore, love more deeply, express more fully, and contribute more meaningfully. When that natural expansion is blocked, people often feel restless, frustrated, or dull inside. This is an important insight because many people misinterpret that restlessness. They think something is wrong with them because they are dissatisfied. But sometimes dissatisfaction is not a flaw. Sometimes it is a signal that life has become too small for who they are trying to become. Burchard treats this longing for expansion as deeply human. It is the urge to develop your gifts, stretch your identity, enlarge your courage, deepen your understanding, and live with greater intensity and purpose. The problem is that fear, conformity, and routine can cause people to suppress that longing. When they do, motivation drops. Energy fades. Life begins to feel repetitive and emotionally thin. Not because the person is incapable of joy, but because they are no longer growing in ways that nourish the soul. This is why Burchard keeps pushing the reader toward aliveness. He wants them to stop seeing growth as optional. He wants them to understand that expansion is often part of psychological and spiritual health. People feel better when they are becoming more than they were, not less. The practical lesson is to notice where life has become too narrow. Where have you stopped growing? Where have you settled into patterns that no longer challenge or inspire you? Where have you allowed comfort to replace curiosity and purpose? Expansion does not always mean dramatic reinvention. Sometimes it means learning a new skill, speaking more honestly, taking on a meaningful challenge, expressing your ideas, or deciding to hold yourself to a higher standard. Small expansions matter because they restore movement. Burchard's deeper point is that motivation often returns when growth returns. A person becomes more energized when they are stretching towards something worthy. In that sense, expansion is not just about achievement. It is about becoming more fully yourself. The human spirit in this book is not satisfied with mere maintenance. It wants to rise. It wants to create. It wants to live more fully. And when you honor that longing instead of suppressing it, a new kind of motivation begins to emerge. Brendon Burchard understands that inspiration can awaken a person, but discipline is what protects the life they say they want. This is one of the most practical lessons in the Motivation Manifesto. Motivation may begin as emotional fire, but if it is not supported by discipline, that fire fades and leaves little behind. This matters because many people live in cycles of inspiration and collapse. They get excited, make promises, imagine change, and briefly feel powerful. Then everyday life returns, resistance appears, and the new vision dissolves. Burchard knows that this pattern creates frustration and self-doubt. His answer is discipline. Not discipline as harsh control, but discipline as devotion to what matters. The willingness to keep acting in alignment with your values even when the emotional high disappears. The willingness to create routines, standards, and habits that protect your mission. This principle is important because dreams are vulnerable. They are easily weakened by mood, distraction, comfort, and delay. Without structure, even sincere ambition becomes unstable. Burchard wants the reader to see discipline as an ally of freedom, not its enemy. A disciplined life is often more free because it is less ruled by chaos. It has direction. It has order. It has continuity between intention and action. The practical takeaway is clear. If something matters to you, do not depend on feeling inspired every day. Build systems. Create a schedule. Protect your time. Decide in advance what your standards are. Reduce the number of ways you can talk yourself out of what matters. This idea is especially powerful for creative people, ambitious people, and anyone trying to change their life. It reminds them that vision alone is not enough. They must build a life capable of carrying the vision. Burchard's deeper point is that discipline gives dignity to desire. It proves that what you say matters actually does matter. It transforms admiration into embodiment. In the Motivation Manifesto, motivation is not just about feeling alive in the moment. It is about building a structure strong enough to support a life of freedom, courage, contribution, and purpose. Discipline is what helps that vision survive the ordinary days. And in the end, ordinary days are where all great lives are either built or lost. Brendon Burchard does not define a great life only by personal success. A major part of the Motivation Manifesto is the idea that fulfillment grows when life includes contribution. Human beings do not just want pleasure, recognition, or achievement. They also want to matter. They want their energy, work, and presence to create something meaningful beyond themselves. This matters because a life focused only on self-protection becomes emotionally small. A person may avoid risk, chase comfort, and try to secure approval, but still feel strangely unsatisfied. Burchard suggests that part of the reason is that the human spirit wants significance. It wants to give, serve, uplift, create, and leave something valuable behind. Contribution does not have to be grand to be meaningful. It can appear in leadership, art, parenting, teaching, business, friendship, service, or the way you show up for other people. What matters is that your life is connected to something beyond your own comfort. This principle strengthens motivation because contribution gives effort a larger purpose. Hard work becomes easier to sustain when it serves something meaningful. Sacrifice feels different when it is tied to impact. Burchard also pairs contribution with intention. He does not want people to simply stay busy helping randomly. He wants them to live deliberately, to know what they're trying to stand for, to know the kind of influence they want to have, to align their energy with values that matter deeply. The practical lesson is to ask not only what you want from life, but what life is asking from you. What are you meant to build, give, or express? Where can your gifts be used in a way that creates value for others? This section matters because it expands the definition of motivation. Motivation becomes much stronger when it is connected to both identity and service. You are not just trying to improve yourself for vanity or comparison. You are trying to become more capable of contributing something worthwhile. Burchard's message is that fulfillment grows when a person stops living only to get and starts living also to give. In that shift, ambition becomes more noble, discipline becomes more meaningful, and life begins to feel richer because it is connected to purpose that reaches beyond the self. One of the clearest lessons in the Motivation Manifesto is that the great battle of life is often fought in the mind. Brendon Burchard repeatedly emphasizes that the quality of your thoughts shapes the quality of your freedom, your courage, your energy, and your choices. A person can have talent and opportunity, but if their mind is filled with fear, doubt, resentment, distraction, or passivity, their life will suffer. This is why mental vigilance matters so much in the book. Burchard wants the reader to stop treating thought life casually. He wants them to recognize that repeated thoughts become emotional patterns, and emotional patterns become behavior. If you constantly rehearse your limitations, you will act smaller. If you rehearse fear, you will delay. If you rehearse resentment, you will poison your energy. If you rehearse possibility, courage, gratitude, and purpose, your actions begin to change in a different direction. This principle is not about shallow positive thinking. It is about conscious mental leadership. The ability to notice harmful thought patterns, interrupt them, and direct the mind towards something stronger and more useful. The practical lesson is simple but serious. Protect your inner dialogue. Notice what stories you repeat about yourself, your future, and your capacity. Question the assumptions that keep you stuck. Feed your mind with ideas that strengthen your freedom instead of weakening it. This matters because daily life is shaped by inner interpretation. Two people can face the same situation and respond differently based on the quality of their mind. One sees challenge and possibility. The other sees threat and defeat. That internal difference becomes external results over time. Burchard's broader message is that motivation is not maintained by external hype alone. It is maintained by a mind that is trained to remember truth, choose courage, and return to purpose. In that sense, the battle is ongoing. Every day, you must decide what gets authority in your mind. Fear or faith, drift or intention, weakness or resolve, complaint or contribution. The quality of those decisions shapes the quality of your life. For Burchard, a motivated life is not just built through outer action. It is built through the repeated inner choice to guard the mind and lead it toward freedom. As the Motivation Manifesto builds toward its deeper emotional message, one idea becomes unmistakable. Brendon Burchard wants people to stop shrinking. He wants them to live fully, love openly, and stop acting as though life should be approached with permanent hesitation. His challenge is not just to achieve more, but to be more alive. This is powerful because many people are not only underperforming in work. They are underliving in general. They hold back affection. They suppress ideas. They delay adventures. They postpone honesty. They wait for some future version of themselves to become brave enough to fully participate in life. Burchard rejects that pattern. He believes a strong life is lived with openness, courage, gratitude, and real emotional presence. That means being willing to care deeply, give deeply, and engage deeply instead of hiding behind self-protection. This principle expands motivation beyond productivity. It says motivation is also about vitality, about remembering that a meaningful life includes joy, love, awe, connection, and wholeheartedness. A person can be highly efficient and still be emotionally absent. Burchard wants more than efficiency. He wants aliveness. The practical lesson is to look honestly at where you have been shrinking. Where have you become too guarded? Too cautious? Too numb? Too concerned with appearance? Then begin choosing expansion instead. Speak with more sincerity. Show appreciation more openly. Take meaningful risks. Stop waiting for perfect conditions to fully inhabit your own life. This principle matters because people often assume that seriousness and self-protection will keep them safe. But sometimes they only keep life small. A person can avoid pain and still lose joy. They can avoid embarrassment and still lose meaning. Burchard's message is that the cost of shrinking is too high. Your life becomes thinner, quieter, and less true. That is why he keeps calling readers toward courage and expression. He wants them to remember that they are here not just to survive, but to live. In the Motivation Manifesto, motivation is deeply tied to the willingness to participate in life with full heart, to love openly, to speak honestly, to pursue meaning boldly, to stop apologizing for being alive and ambitious. That is where the book becomes more than a guide to drive. It becomes a declaration for fuller living. By the end of the Motivation Manifesto, Brendon Burchard's message becomes unmistakably clear. This book is a challenge to reclaim your life. Not partially. Not someday. Not when conditions are easier. Now. The deeper purpose of the manifesto is to remind the reader that freedom, motivation, courage, discipline, and meaning are not luxuries for a chosen few. They are part of what makes a human life fully lived. The book's final power comes from how all its themes connect. Freedom matters because without it, motivation collapses. Courage matters because fear will always try to limit your life. Self-mastery matters because intention means little without discipline. Meaning matters because empty effort cannot sustain deep drive. Voice matters because suppressed truth weakens the soul. Contribution matters because fulfillment grows when life reaches beyond self-protection. Together, these ideas form a larger challenge. Stop living as if your life should be controlled by fear, passivity, distraction, or approval. Stop shrinking your potential to fit old habits. Stop waiting to become the person you are capable of being. What makes this message powerful is that it is both emotional and practical. It does not simply tell you to dream. It tells you to choose. To decide what kind of life you are willing to fight for. To decide what kind of mind you will lead. To decide what standards you will live by. To decide that your voice, your freedom, and your purpose will no longer be treated casually. For anyone watching this summary, the practical takeaway is clear. Reclaim your attention. Reclaim your courage. Reclaim your standards. Reclaim your right to live by intention instead of drift. Start speaking more honestly. Start acting more boldly. Start protecting what matters. Start treating your life as something worthy of full commitment. You do not need to become perfect overnight. But you do need to stop pretending that a half-lived life is acceptable. That is the challenge of this book. It asks for honesty, bravery, and action. In the end, the Motivation Manifesto is not just about motivation in the common sense of the word. It is about human freedom. It is about resisting the forces that make people smaller, quieter, and more afraid. It is about building a life of dignity, discipline, purpose, and courageous expression. And that is why the book leaves such a strong impression. It does not whisper. It demands that you remember who you are, what your life can mean, and how much power returns the moment you choose to live with full intention.